Well, it wasn't the worst episode of X, Y, and Z. It just wasn't structured properly. Pokemon! 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 Hello everyone, I'm Dustin Benzel, and welcome to another Pokemon X, Y, and Z anime discussion. I'm sorry if this video is not organized very well. I haven't been feeling very well at all today, so I haven't been able to watch the episode twice and make notes on it, but I wanted to record this. I've got some images, and I can talk about the episode as it goes, so if I miss anything, or I misunderstood, or misremembered, I definitely apologize. There's also not that much information in regards to the upcoming episodes outside of what I told you in my last video, so we're just going to discuss the episode, my thoughts on the episode, and then of course I'm going to discuss the next episode preview, and that's pretty much all that this video is going to have. And probably, no, well, maybe, I don't know, let's see, maybe, no, I guess this week will probably be light. I can't think of what I plan to do for my next video outside, of course, the Team Rocket, Team Flare review episode. So anyway, let's jump right into this. This episode started right in the battle with Ash versus Sawyer. Hawlucha versus Shelgon. Bagon evolved. And of course, Hawlucha wins using a flying press. So then, of course, it's the same format as their last real battle between each other after, what was it, Valerie, I believe it was. So, of course, after that battle, of course, it's Honedge versus Pikachu. And then I think at that point was the opening or something of that nature. The opening was somewhere around there. So Pikachu defeats Honedge using a Thunderbolt. Bye Honedge. And then of course, oh no wait, and then Sawyer sent out Sceptile, and then Ash sent out Greninja, and then it was the opening. Okay, I see the little title screen here. Sorry about that. So then of course it's Sceptile versus Greninja. Now the cool, interesting thing, but I will have my criticisms later on, is that the one cool thing is Ash and Sceptile are battling, and of course the interesting thing about this is, of course, Alain has actually seen this. He's looking for Mega Evolution Energy, at least that's what I think he's looking for, and he manages to catch the battle between Ash and Sawyer, get their attention. Now, the cool thing is Sawyer Sceptile seems to be a step above Greninja, because it takes until not Mega Evolution, until the form change of Ash Greninja for Greninja to beat Sceptile. Now, this is cool because the moment that it becomes Ash Greninja, it speeds much quicker than Sawyer and Sceptile were expecting. It used Air Release on Sceptile and basically smacked it into a wall. And of course, that was the end of the battle, and of course, Ash won. So then Sawyer's like all inquisitive about what's happening. What is Ash Greninja? So of course they heal their Pokemon. Alain heals his just Charizard, and of course Sawyer and Ash are talking about this all while Sylveon is being brushed by Serena. So they're talking about Ash Greninja, and I think it was Sawyer that mentioned that it looks similar to Ash Greninja, because I think, and again, I don't speak Japanese.
Editing Dustin here. What I'm about to say in this video might be incorrect. I have read one translation that says to the contrary. I'll leave what I thought was being said alone so you can see what I had initially thought. But what was likely being said was the suggestion of Ash becoming Greninja, rather than what I thought was actually being said. So here's what I thought was being said.
so I don't know. But the way that the dialogue was presented, along with the facial expressions and the reactions of Ash, I'm thinking, and this could be wrong, but I'm thinking Sawyer is the one that dubbed it Ash Greninja, because there were moments where he was like saying pretty much the same thing, like Satoshi Geguka, which is the Japanese version, but then of course he says it again, and Ash is like, Satoshi Geguka, and and I think it was at that moment that it was actually naming Ash Greninja, but I could be completely wrong. Maybe he was just like trying to figure out something himself, but it seemed like he was reacting differently than if Sawyer was just talking about Ash's Greninja in general. And the fact that Sawyer directly to him said Satoshi Gekuka. Now, I don't know about Japanese, but in English, um, unless you're talking to somebody else, you don't necessarily reference someone's name and their cat or their animal or their pet directly to their face. Someone isn't going to come up to me and say, Dustin, so how is Dustin's Pokemon doing, or cat doing, or sometimes I will get that from like my friends or whatever. They'll say like, how is Dustin doing, or something like that. It kind of makes sense, but the multiple times that Sawyer was saying Satoshi Gekuka, I think it was like 2 or 3 times, makes me think that he was actually just talking about the form itself, and I think that's what happened, but I could be completely wrong. So anyway, then of course we get one of the really good aspects of this episode, and that's Alain talking to Lysander. And the thing about that is he actually asks what Marin is doing and how Chespin is doing, and we actually get an image of Marin and her Chespin, which is still glowing. And of course, a lot of people were thinking Marin was going to have like a limited role because she wasn't on the poster. Of course, Mega Sceptile was on the poster without Sawyer. So yeah, it was really nice touch that they actually added Marin into the main series. I hope that it will be resolved soon, so maybe Marin can meet Ash, and then of course remember that he was the one that saved Garchomp and Pikachu in the beginning of second episode of the XY&Z series. That's right. The first episode ended with Ash taking Froakie to Professor Sycamore's. So then we get a scene which is kind of disappointing but expected. We get a night scene of Sawyer saying goodbye to everyone, and then of course Ash and company retreat back into the Pokemon Center. But before that happens, Alain actually is in there. And then afterwards, we get the half-end scene of the episode, and then the episode starts right back up with Xerosic using some sort of laser of some kind and building it and using Zygarde cells and then firing that energy at something, and then suddenly a tree starts growing. A tree just starts growing and growing and growing. So that was another cool aspect, and I will of course talk about the really positive aspects, unfortunately, because I do have criticisms about this particular episode. So then of course it cuts back to barely like dawn, like maybe a couple of hours before anyone would wake up, probably. So everyone's sleeping, and then of course Team Rocket steal Pikachu. They do their motto, and then of course they send out Inkay and Gurgeist because, and of course because no one has any Pokemon, it's up to Charizard to save Pikachu. And then of course that's when Alain and Ash kind of meet. But the only thing that's really said, at least from what I can infer, is that he wants to battle his Charizard against Greninja. Because, of course, Alain actually saw Ash Greninja earlier in the episode, so he wants to battle it. So then, of course, it's Ash versus Alain. So, of course, I feel like in the very beginning of the episode, it's pretty neutral for the most part, but Charizard has an obvious edge. And then, of course, Charizard becomes Mega Charizard X. And then, of course, Greninja suffers and doesn't do as well up until, of course, it transforms into Ash Greninja. And then, of course, despite not really doing very much and a very fast blast burn knocks out Greninja, and then of course Ash is exhausted and falls over and is happy that he had a very strong opponent, and then of course Ash and Alain properly introduce each other to each other, and then they shake hands and move on, and then of course I think Ash was talking about it or something like that. I think he may have been a little upset that he lost or found someone new and strong that he can consider a rival. And then, of course, we saw Alain walking away for some reason, probably to go to next episode plot. And then, of course, it cuts to Xerosic and his admins and grunts. And, of course, they're looking at a giant tree that the machine created, I believe, and it has like red parts all over it and stuff or whatever. The weapon or device they used. And that's pretty much the end of the episode. Yeah, like I said, I have a lot of criticisms for this episode because that was pretty short. I didn't have a lot to talk about. Like I said, the disappointing thing is that the most interesting scenes out of this entire episode had to do with the equivalent of this being a Mega Evolution act for the most part, minus the Mega Evolutions. And the reason why I say that is because the scene with Lysander and Marin and the scenes with Xerosic were the best moments in this episode, and that's kind of upsetting to me. You know, this did feel like a special almost, except it's not a special. It felt like it was a Team Flare special, and because Alain is a part of Team Flare, unwillingly or unwittingly a part of Team Flare, and it's like Ash and company were basically shoehorned into this, as well as Team Rocket. Of course, what makes sense here is the introduction of Team Rocket. Since they have a giant role in the next episode and Alain is going to be there, I can see that there is going to possibly be some remembering of each other. Team Rocket are going to remember the Charizard that interrupted them stealing Pikachu. And of course, Team Rocket are going to realize that Alain are mostly on Team Flare's side. So like I said, this episode was just very okay. It wasn't very decent or really good or anything like that. It was just very okay. And the problem that I have with this episode is primarily the pacing. The battle with Sawyer was completely rushed, except technically Greninja versus Sceptile. And the thing is, I'm not going to blame the rushed battle for Sawyer's lack of skill. I do think that if this episode was a lot more fleshed out, Shelgon and Honedge would have done better against their respective opponents, and the battle would have been a little bit longer and a little bit more thought out, or whatever, and Sawyer wouldn't have had a huge disadvantage. The reason why I say this is because Sceptile did a lot better against Greninja, and the thing is, in the last battle they had, Frogadier outright beat Sceptile, so it's kind of hard for me to imagine that Greninja still wouldn't be a step ahead of Sceptile, and it took until Ash Greninja for Greninja to beat Sceptile, which means I do think that Sawyer is developing into a fairly decent rival, enough to give Ash a hearty challenge in the Pokemon League when we get to that particular part. But it was completely rushed, and I didn't like it. And also, the one thing that I say that I dislike the most about this battle Greninja made sense. I have no problem with Greninja. It's set up for the plot later on within the episode. What I have a problem with is Ash using the same exact team against Sawyer, and at least Sawyer used one different Pokemon. Sure, he used Bagon in the last episode, but it had evolved, but he used a new Pokemon against Ash. Ash used the same exact three Pokemon as he did in the last episode. I would have much preferred Talonflame being used against Honedge, and like I said in the previous episode, with Pikachu being used against the Dance Party. Is Pikachu being used so much because it's not going to be used against Wolfric? Because that's the only acceptable thing that I can think of. I mean, I can understand, and I have said this before, that these battles, these small miniature battles that Pikachu is getting, might be making up for the fact that Pikachu has not been in a gym battle since Clement. But the problem that I have with that is that if Pikachu is going to be used against Wolfric, then I feel like this episode, these battles would make sense for Pokemon that aren't going to be used against Wolfric. I don't know what Wolfric's going to be. I don't know if it's going to be a 3-on-3, a 4-on-4, 5-on-5, or maybe magically we'll get a full battle. I don't know. Although Ash still has yet to get a full team, so I very much doubt that. At most, it's probably going to be a 5-on-5 if it's going to be anything like that. And then of course it'll depend on what's going to happen this year in terms of Pokemon games. What Wolfric's team might be. So yeah, I have a problem with Ash using the same exact team. To be honest, I didn't have a much problem with Hawlucha, because Hawlucha hasn't really done anything, just like Noibat, since the Sky Relay battle. Hawlucha hasn't been getting a lot of attention. It just barely recently got anything in the Noibat episode, a couple episodes. So I'm perfectly fine with that. But Ash could have used Noibat or Talonflame, and especially with the episode coming up really soon, Noibat would have made a lot of sense to use during this particular moment. Granted, it wouldn't have been able to do very much against Honedge, given that it's a steel type and a ghost type, and maybe Noibat beating Shelgon wouldn't have made much sense. But even so, Sawyer could have at least beaten Noibat. At least give Noibat some battling experience, even though it lost. Would have made a lot of sense if they want to believably make Sawyer look like tough. And, Noibat losing would have made sense. Shelgon could have used, I don't know, Dragon Breath. I think it can learn that. Or I think it can use that. Dragon Breath against a Noibat would have been fine. Just have acrobatics hitting Shelgon, Shelgon taking the damage, and the Noibat loses. Then maybe you can have Pikachu battling against Honedge, I guess. I don't know, maybe. Sorry, Hawlucha, but I'm trying to think of a way. Hawlucha could have been used against another brand new Pokemon. Or, it could have been Noibat. Noibat could have at least used acrobatics against... Yeah, okay, so Hawlucha gets Shelgon. Noibat could have gotten Honedge, so they're pretty much tied. And then it could have been Sceptile versus Greninja. So anyway, outside of that, and then the problem... The basic outline of the episode is really problematic because it seemed to be too battle, and I'm not saying that battles are bad, even too much battling. It's just that it wasn't structured properly. This episode seemed like it was attack after attack after attack, but a lot of battling episodes, they kind of have dialogue within it, or at least the battles are well thought out and well presented that you can ignore the lack of dialogue. But there seemed to be heavily lack of dialogue, and the only dialogue heavy parts were like after the battle with Sawyer, and that was pretty much it. And of course there's that Xerosic scene and Lysander's scene talking to Alain. Those kind of had some dialogue. But the moment that Team Rocket kidnapped Pikachu, Poke-napped Pikachu, to basically the end of the episode, there was very little extra dialogue except introductions and talking about things and talking about how things are, so it's very weird battling structure. Now, on to my criticism of Ash versus Alon. The only real criticism the only minor criticism that I have of this episode is the fact that most of the scenes we saw in the New Year's preview were seen in the episode. There was hardly anything new. Actually, I can't think of anything that was technically new outside of maybe Greninja using Water Shuriken. Now, the major criticism that I have this episode, and the reason why I think this is structured properly, and there may be justifications for this, but I still have a problem with it, and it's when Blast Burn was used against Greninja, Ash didn't seem to take any damage. When Greninja was knocked out and became a normal Greninja, and of course Alon won, the only thing that happened to Ash is that he fell over exhausted, which is very similar to what happened when he was battling against Sawyer in the beginning of the episode. Ash felt a little faint and exhausted. The problem that I have with that is that in the Terminus episode, we saw that Ash took visible damage against Celosia's Manetrix attack. At least I'm assuming that's the right trainers. Yeah, Bryony had Lipard, right? Okay, hopefully I said that right. So to see Ash not taking any damage and Ash reacts almost the same exact way against Sawyer during this Ash Greninja moment. And if you remember, when it was Greninja versus Sceptile, Greninja did take damage, but only its standard form. The moment it became Ash Greninja and used Aerial Ace, I think it was Aerial Ace against Sceptile, and Sceptile got knocked down, Greninja hadn't taken any damage from that point. So having Ash feel exhausted in the exact same manner, despite the fact that Greninja actually lost and was affected by Blast Burn and received no noticeable damage, makes the episode structured improperly and doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, there could be some justifications here, but they still don't make any sense, because Greninja took a lot more damage in this moment than against Sawyer Sceptile when it was Ash Greninja. So having Ash pretty much react the same exact way after the battle ends does not make any sense to me. Now, the justification is that Manetrix Scratch was a physical attack and Blast Burn is one of the strongest fire special moves, so maybe it's only physical attacks that Ash feels. Could make sense, but Blast Burn is still a very powerful attack, and the other possible excuse is that maybe the water veil that Greninja had when it was Ash Greninja took most of the damage. If that were true, I don't think Greninja would have been knocked out. The fact that Greninja was knocked out meant that it suffered enough damage to take the full brunt of an attack to knock it out. The reason why I say this is it couldn't have been minimal that Ash did not get affected at all, but Greninja still got knocked out from the attack, because I would assume Manetrix Scratch was much weaker than Blast Burn, and Greninja was relatively fine after that battle, after that move. So having Ash feel basically nothing from Blast Burn doesn't really make a lot of sense. So it seems like they're keeping the mystery of Ash Greninja a secret. They tried to do something with Sawyer, maybe even dubbing the Pokemon Ash Greninja, instead of it being a Mega Pokemon or whatever. Some translations that I've read have said that Alon thinks it's a mega evolution without a mega stone, and Keystone saying that it mega evolved because of the bond between Ash and Greninja. I think it was Sawyer or something that mentioned something about a fusion or something like that. I really don't know. Maybe that's what he meant by Satoshi and Gekuka, and that it was a fusion between the two or whatever. But yeah, this episode just, it wasn't structured properly. It was, I don't know what to describe it. It was like taking parts of other episodes and stitching them together and then calling it an episode. But at the same time, it wasn't bad because I wasn't necessarily bored with it. I was just disappointed. I was just ultimately disappointed with how the episode happened, but I wasn't bored of it, which is why the episode was okay, because I was still intrigued about things and I still wanted to see how they happened. It's just that when the episode ended, it just left disappointed. Now, if I wasn't very excited for this episode, and I wasn't looking forward to this episode, and I was bored throughout the whole entire episode up until until the end of it, and I'm still bored, that's what would make a bad episode. But this episode, despite some disappointing moments, it was still intriguing and interesting, and I wanted to see how it ended. But just like the New Year's preview, I was excited about the scenes of the New Year's preview, but then it just suddenly ended without giving a little bit more, and that's what I was disappointed in the New Year's preview. The same thing happened here. I was intrigued, interesting to see what was happening, and then it just basically ended. I'm like, that's it? So again, it wasn't a bad episode. It just was a very okay episode. They could have done a lot better, and I know a lot of people think that maybe could have been better if this was two separate episodes, and that kind of does make sense. Have Ash and Sawyer be its own episode, have Alon cameo in that scene kind of the same way, and then have the next episode be more about the effects of Ash Greninja battling against Alon, have Alon save Pikachu from Team Rocket, and then of course have Blastburn knock Ash unconscious or whatever. And it's not that I'm disappointed that nothing happened to Ash during Blastburn, but it seems contradictory to what we already know. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this particular episode. So let's go ahead and move on to the next episode, which we're talking about the preview. Just a little note ahead of, just to let you know, the next episode, the Team Rocket versus Team Flare episode, is going to have the new Team Rocket ending in it. So we can definitely expect that. I don't expect spoilers, and if I see Phantup in the ending dancing around James, I'm going to be super upset. But I don't expect any spoilers. I think it's just going to be very similar to Bonnie and Puny Chan, except it's going to be just around Team Rocket and their Pokemon or something like that. Maybe we'll see Malamar, even though I still don't want James Inkay to evolve. Or maybe we'll get a new capture for Jessie. Maybe it'll be like a Furfrou. I don't know, but I don't really expect any spoilers. But the preview was the next episode preview was disappointing because it proved my theory wrong. I thought Blue Puny Chan can only change into 50% form, while Puny Chan, Blue Zygarde Core I thought it can only turn into 50% form, and I thought that Puny Chan, Red Zygarde Core, can only turn into 10% form. I was wrong. Apparently, Blue Zygarde Core can turn into 10% form, which kind of is disappointing to me because I really thought it made sense. Because now I'm thinking, why is it that in the preview we saw Blue Zygarde Core instantly going to 50% form? Why would it feel the need to abandon 10% form completely? And of course, also, why is it that Puny Chan, every time it turns into 10% form, it's exhausted beyond belief? Now, I can understand the argument that, well, of course, it kind of makes sense because every time that Puny-chan turned into 10% form, it was already attacked and exhausted. And that kind of does make sense, but every time it uses 10% form, when it's done, it's even more exhausted than it was. It looked like it was close to death in the very first episode of XY&Z, and yet I'm pretty sure Puny-chan before that was relatively fine. So it doesn't make sense that 10% or 50% is using so much energy that Puny-chan is pretty much dying. So that's what I thought, and we still have yet to see Puny-chan turn into 50% form. So it's kind of weird that that's the way it is. So, of course, in the preview, we saw Zygarde 10% blue core thing. So there's an image of it, and it was battling against Weavile, which I think is Aliana's or Mabel's. I think, no, it's Mabel's, I think, because it was someone like that. I think it's Mabel's, though. Of course, there's also, we didn't see Giovanni, but we know Giovanni is in the episode, and of course, Alain is in the episode. We didn't get any scenes of Ash and company, so I expect them to be basically in the beginning of the episode just to blast off Team Rocket. And of course, we may get Puny-chan and Bonnie later in the episode when Puny-chan senses there's something wrong with Blue Zygarde Core, and maybe Ash and company will say a couple of words or whatever. But the next episode is going to be primarily about Team Flare versus Team Rocket. And while I'm not entirely looking forward to it, I will admit that I do think that it's going to be one of the better Team Rocket focused episodes that we have gotten. And if I can recall, and if I can remember all the Team Rocket focused episodes, not counting Jesse's Pokemon showcases, this might be one of the best Team Rocket focused episodes of the 6th generation anime series, but I could be wrong. And I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this particular episode. Again, I don't think there was any new information outside of that for the other episodes, so those are going to have to wait until maybe next week when we get the preview for the Chestnut and Robon episode. Because I think that's what's next. Wait. If the Zapdos... Oh, yeah. Okay, so I think the Robon episode is next after the Team Rocket episode, and then it's Serena's Dragonair episode. Okay, so, alright, I clarified that for myself. Because I was wondering, I was like, oh yeah, after the Chestnut episode, it should be the Zapdos episode. But after that episode, it's just the 25th. And then, of course, oh wait, I'm wrong, of course. It's the Serena episode, so yeah. I'm not expecting next episode to be all that exciting or all that interesting outside of being one of the better Team Rocket episodes that has appeared in the entirety of the 6th generation anime, and I really don't have strong feelings for Team Rocket, so it's not really something that I'm interested in. But if you like Team Rocket, I'm sure you'll be glued to your television or computer screen when it comes out next week. Also, of course, after that, I expect a pretty basic episode with Clement in regards to Chestnut and the robot thing or whatever. And then maybe we'll get heavy into the Dragonair Amelia episode. And then, of course, we'll get into the exciting Zapdos episode. The thing that I'm really upset is that it doesn't seem like Noibat's going to be used until the Zapdos episode, where it's most likely going to evolve, which is very disappointing, and which is why one of the problems I had with this episode was Noibat not being used, and Ash using this same exact team he did in the earlier episode. Maybe Sawyer asked for it. Maybe we didn't get to see it because it was off screen, but maybe Sawyer asked for something like that, so maybe that's why Ash used the same exact Pokemon, because he wanted to test his strength against those specific Pokemon since he's most familiar with those Pokemon. But even so, why then would Sawyer use Honedge? You know, they could have mixed it up a little bit or made it a 4-on-4. You know, had Halucha battling against uh, Shelgon and maybe Noibat against Honedge, like I said, or whatever. And then maybe Pikachu versus Slurpuff or something, or maybe a new Pokemon. But anyway, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about anything. I was going to say look forward to some stuff, but that's probably not going to happen until next week. After the Team Rocket review episode, and the discussion for the Chestnut episode, and if there's a new title, I'll talk about it then, or maybe in another video. But by next Thursday, next Friday, or something, from that point up until the Chestnut episode, I'm expecting potentially Koro and potentially Pokemon Fan. I don't know if Pokemon Fan is a thing anymore. I don't know if they discontinued after November, but if they're going to start Pokemon Fan, I'm expecting it to also happen around during this time, but that particular video may wait until probably after the Chestnut episode up to the Dragonair episode, which might be the case. But expect sometime next week, Friday, Saturday, the 12th or the 13th, or even the 14th, I will be making that Koro discussion because I'm pretty sure we'll get leaks by then. Or maybe earlier. Maybe I'll be making 2 videos next Thursday about the leaks of Koro. But I'll typically wait until like Friday or Saturday before doing a Koro discussion, even if leaks come out, because I want to make sure to give enough time if there's any more information. Of course, it might not be anime related. It might just be all about games. Maybe they'll reveal that Z is coming out, or maybe they'll reveal 7th generation, and maybe we'll get like some sort of trailer introducing the next generation with the 3 next generation starters. I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see what this big discussion revelation, which I'm pretty sure is going to be that exciting probably. It's knowing Koro, it's probably not going to be exciting at all. But giving them a little bit of benefit of the doubt, maybe it'll be an exciting announcement in next Koro. So I'll look forward to that. So I think I'm pretty much done with this particular video. So thank you for watching. I'm Dustin Benzel, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.